Well, hello and welcome to another Map Room briefing, where today we're talking about how do you get the business that you want. And the reason we're saying that is our mission at MAP has always been, or has been for a long time, to help clients get the business that they want to be able to lead the life that they want. So today we really want to talk about a little bit more about that and what's behind it and what does it mean. So the obvious candidate for our subject matter expert today is Paul Barnes. Paul, for anyone who doesn't know him, is the founder and MD of MAP. And to put some context into this, Paul's been speaking at a number of engagements up and down the country recently, specifically about this and about what Paul refers to as option planning. So I think really what we'd like to understand is how do you make those decisions? How do you look? First of all, how do you decide the business that you want, maybe the lifestyle that you want? And we did a little bit of that with Adam Downs. And how do you understand your goals and your ambitions? But I suppose the first question, Paul, is how do you go about building that business?
I think, as you said, it's about being real about what it is that you want. And I think one of the tricky thing is that changes over time as well. You know, people often say, let's remember why you got into this in the first place. But that might have changed. I set my business up 12 years ago. The reason that I enjoy the business and still have the business and driven by the business is different from what it was 12 years ago. So I think, first of all, it's about, in order to build the business that you want, as you said, it's about taking a step back and taking the time to work out, if you can, because some businesses are just so distressed that they just need to focus on getting themselves out of a hole. And unfortunately, they've not got the time to zoom out. But if you're in that position where you can take stock, I think just having the conversation with someone who's ready to listen and to challenge you in terms of why do you have a business and what role are you looking for it to play, because many of us lose sight of that. And it's like we become wedded to our business and it's like we're there to serve the business rather than the other way around. So I think just taking stock and just reflecting on what are the real reasons that you've got this business now. And I think people are quite surprised sometimes when we challenge them on that, because we're almost doing ourselves out of a job if we're discussing, maybe not even having a business or closing a business, which sounds mad. But just because you set up a business does not mean you owe it anything, and does not mean that it's currently serving your current purpose. You could have health issues, financial issues, new passions, new hobbies, new ventures that you want to explore. There are lots of reasons why I think it's healthy to reflect on why you've got this business now. And then if you do decide you love this business, you want to carry on with it, you do it in full vigour, having made that informed decision as to what role it's playing in your life.
I think also, as you said there, specifically in the sector that we represent, the agency sector, I've said many times before, the agency was often created as a vehicle to bill a craft. And then, as you say, suddenly, you find yourself 12 years in, you find yourself some time in, and it's reflecting, well, why you started it might have been one thing, but what it does now for you and what you now need out of your life and your life changes, etc. Again, it's how do you assess and is it still appropriate? But also, I suppose, it's that, when you start something, you're only looking, aren't you, to it, sometimes the very next day. But after a number of years, at what point do you put your head up above the parapet, zoom out, to use your phrase, and actually look forward and say, okay, this is now stable. If it is stable, if it's not stable, that's a different conversation. But let's assume it's stable, it's giving me what I think I want. How do I then address it? So, as I say, we spoke about with Adam previously about how you can look at the sort of plans for yourself. But so let's assume that we've done that. We've got something that says, I now want this business to do something for me. Talk through the sort of conversations you've been having recently, the presentations you've made around what you call your option planning. Explain that for everybody.
Yeah, so it basically distilled it into two routes that try to simplify and give some clarity on what kind of business that you might want. So we've labelled it as lifestyle or capital. And the lifestyle one is the one that I think has the biggest misunderstanding, or maybe even negative connotations, where people see it as a back bedroom hobby, eBay business or something, something that you do on the side. Whereas you and I see businesses that we would categorise as lifestyle that are making a couple of $100,000 a year, really enviable businesses where the business owner can put the laptop down during a weekday, during a half term, spend time with the children, and things don't fall apart. The difference, I think, is that it's maybe not as sellable as an asset. And the way that when I've been presenting recently, I've been trying to explain it to people. A capital business is about almost taking you out of the picture in terms of the ideal business that you want. And it's thinking about the ideal business that a buyer might want and try to look at your business through the market, through a third party eyes, and is this something that you would invest in? There are lots of fantastic lifestyle businesses that if it wasn't your business, you probably wouldn't invest in it because it's serving the life of that business owner and there's nothing wrong with that. And a capital business is something very different. It's where would you, if you didn't know anything about, if you weren't involved in the building of this business and the passion of the business, you looked at it purely as a commercial return, is this a business that you would invest in? And so it's quite a different direction between whether you want a lifestyle business and a capital business. You're probably willing to make far less sacrifices for a lifestyle business and more sacrifices for a capital business.
Sacrifices in what way? Are we talking time? Are we talking value extraction? What do you mean when you say sacrifices?
A lot of things, really. The thing I often spring towards is focus on when I think of this is like the type of clients that you deal with. So, you might look down your client list and think, yeah, they're maybe not as ideal a client if I was to hand it over to somebody else because maybe they're not in the niche that we promote ourselves as, or maybe they're not quite as profitable, but you know what? The team love working with them. It's good for morale. So you might find other lifestyle reasons or maybe opinionated subjective reasons why you keep them as a client. But if you were cleaning the business up for a sale, you would probably be exiting those clients from the business. So that would be one area. Others, as you said, value extraction. You might not be as aggressive with your dividend extraction, your benefits in kind, your pension contributions if you were building a business towards exit. Management team is a massive one. You might have quite a flat structure if you're looking to run a lifestyle business, and running a capital business you might have to take a big hit to your drawings from the business because you're putting a management function in place that will only yield results further down the line. So there's a few examples.
Yeah, makes sense. So what you're saying is if it's capital focused, then it's really about treating the business as the asset. So the business as the entity. Yes, it might be your business, and what you're saying there is you question potentially your role in it at that point. If you're going to look to sell it on, yes, a management team is probably what anybody, whether it's an acquisition or an investment, that's what they tend to invest in. And we often see, don't we, particularly again in our space, that I can't think of any agency that's been sold where there hasn't been an earn-out period for that reason, because they tend to want to keep the principal involved, sometimes for non-compete purposes, sometimes for handover, etc. But I suppose it's about that as well, isn't it? Which is, again, and I'm sure we can go into more detail of the kind of things you can look at. So what you're saying is that the capital focused one is less about you and what you're getting from it, more about what you're doing to, I don't mean window dress as in a negative way, but retain the maximum value in the business as the asset, potentially for somebody else.
I think another good example that we often talk about, Stuart, is the sales function. So if you're going to build a business to sell, then a buyer would want to see proven track record of an ability to generate and close opportunities, and ideally that be self-generated within the business, i.e. without you as the owner who's not going to be here one day. Whereas if I look at my own role at MAP now, if I make a couple of discovery calls a week, I can manage that, a couple of hours of my time per week of work. I'm happy with that. I would rather do that than pay the salary of a salesperson at this stage, or a business development person, because that would be a sacrifice to margin and difficult to find those people, difficult to make it work out. And at the same time, I quite enjoy it. I enjoy working with prospects. It's like the right level of my contribution to the business and involvement in the business. So that would be a typical lifestyle decision versus a capital decision.
Yeah, interesting. So let's talk a little bit more about, say, sort of our definition of lifestyle then, because as we say, there's been, and I don't know whether it's a UK thing, but very often a lifestyle business for some reason appears to be looked down on in some cases. But as I say, we have some great lifestyle clients, and we know of others that have got very profitable businesses. And as you say, that I think those individuals, those owners have already made that conscious decision that the business is there to support me in what I want to do, rather than I am this business per se. So explain what you mean by a lifestyle business, and how would you recognise a lifestyle business?
What I mean by it is giving a financial return, definitely. So it needs to be profitable. So just to be clear, we're here talking about a quality lifestyle business and a quality capital business. We're not talking about if it's not capital, it's automatic lifestyle, because it could be a failing business. So it needs to be given a financial return. It's not going to be a good quality, enviable lifestyle business if it's not making some money. How much money is obviously subjective and different for different people. You'll know that I talk about, and I'm a big fan of the upside down P&L. So working out what a good return looks like for you. So the bottom line, and then working it back to see what your top line should be rather than the other way around. So definitely a financial return, that you're not wedded to your business all the time. So, you're not working all hours, but you're working hours that you're happy with. Again, subjective. Lifestyle for one person might be 15 hours a week. Lifestyle for another person might be, I'm working 56 hours a week, but I love it. And I'm still there when I need to be for, the key moments in life. So the hours that you work. And then the final part, I would say, is about fulfillment. So are you actually fighting a cause that you believe in? Is the purpose that you're pursuing with this business something that you are passionate about? Around that, I would say, is like your personal fulfillment as well, enjoyment outside of the business. Are you able to enjoy the time and money to enjoy the things that you enjoy out of life, to buy the things that you want, have the experiences that you want? That for me, it was always the snooker table. Being able to buy that was an emotional purchase for me. Not a dead expensive purchase, needed some money, but it was much higher on the emotional scale than it was on the, I wasn't buying a luxury yacht, I was buying a snooker table. But emotionally, it meant more for me for the reasons that you know. So I would say it revolves around those things when you're talking lifestyle. If you're building a business for capital event, buyer doesn't care about any of those things. That's irrelevant for them to buy an asset that generates shareholder value.
Interesting. So let's talk about either the areas that an owner should look at, or ideally the areas that MAP can support that owner with. Let's start with the capital focused business then. So where does we start, and what are the challenges that we seek of the owner? Talk me through how MAP support a business that wants to be capital focused.
It still starts with that personal planning. So understanding when we say capital, we need to have some gauge of when are we talking and how much. So when is this capital event, and what sort of value does this capital event look like? And if you don't take that time out to look at it personally, it'll be a silly reason. Like, my mate sold for 2 million, so I want to sell for more. Yeah. Or this other business down the road or in the same sector sold for 5 times, so I want to sell for 5 times. And none of those things matter, as you know. They're the things that come back to bite people later down the line when they think, what was I thinking? I was doing this for all the wrong reasons. So working out what their number and their date is, I think, is a key starting point.
Okay, and then let's give an example. So I want to create a business that will create £2 million of shareholder value in the next, let's say, 3 to 5 years. I think probably it's important at this point to say the number one caveat on this is, if you're doing it, it's not going to be in a year's time. So let's accept that point. Start this thing, a number of years in advance.
Yeah.
But talk me through the areas and the tools that we use. So let's start with maybe the strategic orbit then. So how do you map this out on a piece of paper? So you're starting at ground zero today. What does 1 year, 2 years, 3 years look like? Talk people through the sort of numbers element. So obviously you'd expect to see some revenue targets on there, and that might break down into types of sales. It might even break down into numbers of customers. But talk through some of the other areas that are on that sort of orbit, things that you might want to look at. You've said their management team, for example.
Just before we move on to that, I think you used a phrase there about over the next 3 to 5 years, which I think is really key, because otherwise people think it's an end point in time. I want to make this number on this date in the future. And you often say exit is not binary, which always really resonates with me. So if we said £2 million in 3 to 5 years, as you know, that could be in 3 years, or it could be over 3 years. So you look at a combination of pension contribution, salary, dividend, benefits, and capital value, which might be part on completion, partly on an earn-out, deferred consideration. So there's that aspect of it first, that it's looking over a period of time. Then I think you need to move into, or this is what we do with our clients, is move into how might you achieve that. So to achieve that, you might need to grow the business. The business might be perfectly fine at the level it's at, so you might just need to maintain it. You have options then on who you sell it to. Is it a third party trade sale? Is it private equity? Is it a management buyout? Is it an employee ownership trust? So there's different ways that you can achieve that number and achieve that outcome. And then you come to the business planning, which I think is the question that you've just asked.
Where do we fit in that? So talk through our exit planning program for argument's sake.
Yeah, so it would be that. First of all, it's about working out what is the capital event you're looking for in terms of time frame and money. Secondly, then it's exploring the different ways that that can be achieved from a transactional perspective, i.e. who are you going to sell to? And broadly, how does that work? What are the mechanics of that? So we'd work through that with them. And then once we land on a high level chosen route, we start to explain the mechanics of that and how that manifests itself from a technical perspective, the advisors that you need, the people that you need involved. And then you start to come on to the business planning bit, which is how much work do we need to do? And if it's a private equity or if it's third party, it's an awful lot more work than if you are doing a employee ownership trust, management buyout, if you're doing a more organic. Or you and I have seen, businesses even choosing just to close the doors, as crazy as that sounds, for a profitable business. Yeah. Walk away with what you've built up as a balance sheet because there's no obvious buyers, externally or internally. You've got a healthy balance sheet, just not that attractive a business to sell. And we've seen businesses close it and walk away with the cash that they've built up and get that at a tax favourable rate. So that's part of it as well. Depending on the chosen route, we'll have different tax consequences. So we need to understand that, to understand what the business looks like, to give them the net proceeds that they want to get from the business as well.
So again, that's still very much about options and what people may or may not want to do. But I want to be specific on, somebody says, exactly, let's use this number. So just for example, the £2 million, 3 to 5 years, but I want the capital event. I want this to, we said in a recent episode, less than 10% of these deals happen. And you and I know the majority of deals that we get involved in don't happen for very, many different reasons. But let's talk about some of the specific things that need to be looked at then. And again, where if someone was going to ask us to help them, let's talk about, so if that plan gets set and we look at it now and say, okay, that's going to be achieved on a multiple of X times your profit is not maybe at that level as it needs to be right now. Talk us through some of the things that we can do in terms of business improvement.
So part of where the mapping name comes from is being able to map where they are now to where they want to be. So that would be, as you've said, if I want £2 million, and usually an agency is valued on a multiple of EBITDA, not always, but usually, what does the EBITDA need to be based on a typical multiple that we're seeing from agencies at the moment? And we use that as a starting point to say, okay, EBITDA is currently X, and to get my 2 million, I need it to get to Y. So then you look at it and say, okay, what would that look like over a 3-year period? So what's the growth rate need to be to revenue and EBITDA? Obviously, you need to look at the relationship between EBITDA as a margin of revenue as well. So you might not need to improve revenue exponentially because you might find efficiency savings that improve EBITDA that way, or you might do. And then does that feel realistic? If that's saying we now need 30% year-on-year growth and we've never done more than 10%, then you might say, well, maybe we should look at a 5-year model instead. So mapping would be, as you put it in your language that you always use, play tunes with a model. Build a model first and then stress test it. Stress test all the assumptions in terms of all the things that I've just said, and then come up with something that seems sensible. And then that shows us from a, high level perspective, what's like the size of this business, what's the revenue and EBITDA, and then you can start to move into more of the detail. Okay, what team is required in order to deliver that? What's the team now? What does the team need to be then? How does it get there? What will the service proposition be? Are there services that we need to add to get to that number? Should we be removing and reducing our service size? Should we be thinking about more of doubling down on a niche sector? Ideally, we want to offer premium pricing. So what would we need to change in order to achieve that? And then start to look at the revenue profile in terms of, okay, where's that revenue going to come from? What do we foresee is happening within our existing client base? And how is that going to progress to the best of our judgment over that time period? And then what would we need? What's the gap then in terms of new business? Does that new business target sound scary, or is it business as usual? If it's scary, then what do we need to do? Do we need to recruit more people to be focused on new business development? Do we need a new business development strategy, etc.?
I think one of the key sort of learnings from this as well is that, so if you get that plan and you've made those assumptions, so let's just say we've done the stress testing, we've worked out and we said, okay, it's not about doubling the size of the revenue potentially, it's about doing a little bit more business as usual, it's about maybe being a bit more efficient, finding a few extra percentage points on the profit, making sure that the overheads managed, the spends managed, all that kind of thing. But I think what you're saying here as well is it's about being then very intentional, isn't it, with your decision making? So you've got this plan, and yes, we're great advocates of saying you do your year's budget in advance, but it's about making sure that every decision that you take is aligned back to that purpose, that focus, isn't it? So as you say, it might be, and we've seen people do this, we're not making the headway that we thought we were going to do in, let's just say, the new business arena. So we'll double down there, we'll go out and we'll hire bodies, but sometimes you've got to bring it back and go, yeah, what's that going to do? Is that going to move your date out further, etc.? So it's being very intentional then with decision making, which I think is something that's a valuable takeaway for people.
Yeah, and again, as you always say, play in tunes with it. So if I do this, it might help that aspect of the attractiveness of this business or the valuation of this business. And that's a really key point with stress as well, is that on paper, your business could be worth your £2 million, but if no one's willing to buy it, it's not worth anything. So you can't just hit that EBITDA and apply a multiple to it at all costs, whatever it takes, because if you look at it, I think you've just done that through sheer grit and determination, then it's still very reliant on you. So have you got a quality business that is in a market that people are actually going to be interested in 3 to 5 years as well?
I think a valid point as well there, Paul, and I've seen this many times where actually the buyer, that's when I use the phrase window dressing, the buyer recognises the tunes you've played on that balance sheet and says, well, hang on a minute, you've only increased the profits in the last year because you've not spent any money, or you've got a burnt out team, or you've got a whatever, or your technology's old. So that's the risk, isn't it, as well as focusing on the, as you say, on paper, you've got to look at the reality of, we all know that the buyer is only buying for their future ownership of the business. They're not really interested in what it's worth on the day they're buying it. They put a respective value on it because they think they can do something with it.
Yeah.
So I think that's quite a lot of the capital focused. Let's move on to the lifestyle stuff. So the lifestyle, let me put a scenario forward and see if you agree with it first. So the lifestyle focus is somebody who says, I've been doing this now for 5 or 6 years. I've got a relatively stable team. I'm quite comfortable with what we're doing. We're in a space I like. I enjoy, whether it's I'm working 7 days a week, whether I'm working 2 days a week, I enjoy my role in it. What is MAP's sort of goal then with helping that personal lifestyle focus? Is it about maximising their profit extraction, or what is it?
First of all, it's very rare. I think that the beautiful scenario that you've painted is very rare, that it's that the business owner is that happy. So often we will be helping them with some of the things that you've just said. So maybe they like it, but they're working a bit too many hours, or they're working the right amount of hours, but they're not quite fulfilled. So it's talking through some of that stuff really, which obviously Pura Vida do really well as well. So most people still want some form of improvement to how their business and the impact it's having on their lives. But assuming all of that is a tick, and it's more about maintaining the status quo. Once you've got to that stage, as you said, it's about, okay, one of the beauties of an owner-managed business is that you've got so much flexibility in terms of how you extract value. You are basically wearing 2 hats, which a lot of business owners don't necessarily recognise. You're one person wearing 2 hats. You're a shareholder and you're a director. So you're an owner and you're an operator. Now a shareholder gets their reward via a return for their shares, which is dividends or capital. They're the only ways that a shareholder can get a return. A director gets rewarded via salary and via benefits, which includes pension contributions. There's an enormous list of benefits that a director can be rewarded for and receive. There are also a number of tax saving things that the business can do, and if the business saves tax, that's extra dividends or extra profits that are available for the business owners to then extract in the way that's most appropriate for them. Now the danger is that a budget gets announced and people think, okay, I just need to change my salary now to be in line with the national insurance threshold or the personal allowance threshold, and I need to go and buy an electric car because it says that that's the lowest rate of benefit in kind, and I now need to put £50,000 a year in my pension instead of 40 or instead of 60, depending on where you're asking. But each business owner's circumstances is different. So the amount that they should be putting into all of those things will depend on their wider lifestyle choices, their wider ventures and other things. They might have property income, they might have another business. Depends what their spouse is doing and what their income is, if they have a spouse, what money they've already got saved up. So there's lots of factors that come into it. But the pension contributions one is a really interesting one, because I know some people, particularly younger people, are averse to squirreling money away, if you like, that they can't touch until later in life. If you're paying the higher rate of corporation tax, you make an instant return of 25%. So by putting £10,000 from your business into a pension scheme, you've made, if that money never does anything, never grows, which wouldn't happen usually on the market, but if it didn't grow at all, you've already made a 25% return because of the corporation tax savings that you've made.
Just explain that, Paul. So what you're saying is that you've taken money out of the business, although it's for your own benefit. So you've taken money, you've invested it in a pension, and because that is, let's just say, £10,000 less profit, you are not being taxed on the profits of that business. So you are putting that income, that money somewhere else, or it's not taxable as a profit.
Yeah, so if the business is generating profits and making money, and you are going to take that money out one day, then at the moment you're paying nearly 40% on taking that money out as a dividend. If you put it into a pension contribution, not only are you not paying the dividend tax, but you're actually making a saving on corporation tax. So arguably you've saved on the dividend tax of nearly 40%, and you've made a 25% return because you've just reduced the corporation tax bill.
So is part of this about I'm going to use the word metrics, but we talk a lot about the kind of performance indicators or the metrics that people want. So are we saying that if it's capital focused, we're talking about viewing it as almost at arm's length? So it's about building an asset. So it's about understanding what levers can be pulled to make this asset greater. Whereas maybe with the lifestyle, what you're saying there is it's about being again intentional, but being more maybe effective with what you're doing with that money. So we always have to say it's never your money. The money belongs to the business, but it's how you take that money out. And maybe are we saying here this is about extracting value over the life of the business rather than keeping all your eggs in one basket to the end?
Yeah, I think it is. You know that sadly there are many business owners that pursued a capital event, and on the other side of that capital event, what most of them, statistically, I think, end up longing for is the days when they had a good lifestyle business.
Yeah.
When they were pursuing their passion, receiving a good income, working good hours. They had a team that they assembled themselves, with a proposition that they had assembled themselves, with an operating model that they built themselves. And that is the stark reality. I think your research said that less than 10% of agencies sell. But I wonder, out of even the 10% that did sell, how many of them were glad that they sold, and how many of them wished they had just pursued the life.
I think a hugely valid point. I mean, I think we all know of cases where, whether it was the complications of an earnout, you've heard me say many times, if you're not prepared to accept the check on day one, don't do a deal, because all the upside you get promised, all the payment number 2, payment number 3 is you're putting it at risk. And also I think there's that huge thing of the business owner. I think they've been sold the dream. They've been sold the. Let's talk about an example that happens a lot in our space, or in the agency space. You're going to go into a group. So there's lots of acquisitive groups out there. So you're going to come in here, and then the number of business owners that we speak to that say, suddenly I'm just another employee. I'm just this and that. I don't think they're really ready for that, really.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's probably a bit of an outdated mod for me personally. I think there's very much when I say an outdated model, ironically, I think it's been driven by a lot of the younger entrepreneurs into the purpose of an entrepreneur is to create something. And I've said before, found it, fund it, and flip it. They think it's there about selling a business, where actually there's a lot of evidence that says, yeah, but you can own this business for a period of time. If it doesn't sell, you sell it for £1, or as you say, you run it and close it in 10 years' time. How do you create that wealth over the period of time?
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of for me, I think there's too many owners today, Paul, who are, I'm not going to say focused, they've got one eye on the prize. So they are making those sacrifices. You know, we often challenge clients about how much they're paying themselves, for example. And they are believing that they are building an asset that may not be worth what they think it's worth. And as you say, the market might not be right. So helping them extract that value over that 3 to 5. Is it about, I want someone to write me a check for £2 million in 5 years' time? Or is it, I want this business to create wealth for me of £2 million over the lifestyle of the business? I suppose you've got more flexibility then, haven't you? If you can do that, you can still choose to sell it in the future, but it's not, you're not reliant on that one outcome.
Yeah, and being intentional, the phrase that you use as well, is you're going to take a different path if you are very clear about selling a business versus having a lifestyle business. So what we're trying to prevent our clients doing is from copying what their mate's done, or what the business book told them, or what the guru on stage told them about building an exitable business, because then they might make decisions, which we see all the time, sadly, that they later regret. I ended up bringing that sales guy in, 80 grand a year, delivered nothing, but they thought it was the silver bullet. The operations person, the amount of money they spent on marketing because they were told that this is what they need to do to sell the business, without taking the time to think, well, actually there are lots of ways of skinning a cat, and is that my strategy? Is that what I'm trying to do? Just because it worked for somebody else, is that actually going to give me the satisfaction that I want? And by the way, don't get me wrong, there are entrepreneurs who are very good at building and selling businesses, and we can absolutely help them. I just think they're in the minority. And one of the things that you always say that I think that holds true with clients is make sure that you're clear on that you're not just running away from a business, and you're running what you're running away from, but what you're running to. And I think that's particularly at the moment when the economy is where it is and agency land is where it is. Sadly, there's a lot of agency owners that are trying to run away from a business that's maybe going through a difficult period without necessarily being clear about what their future is going to be on the other side. And I think that can be quite dangerous as well.
Interesting. If we've got maybe an existing client or somebody who's not a client of MAPS, and they say, okay, look, I'd like to understand this. I hear what you're telling me, and I probably need to be clear. And just, again, for us to be clear, we're not saying you have to be in the capital camp or in the lifestyle camp, because there's elements that cover both. And there's an argument to say if you've got a really profitable lifestyle business, somebody else might want to buy it for that reason. So it's not one or the other. But if somebody says, okay, I'd like to explore this, I'd like to come to some decisions so I can be more intentional, so I'm not just letting this business drag me along for the next 3 to 5 years, what do they need to do, and what do we offer?
Have an initial conversation with us, first of all, free of charge, to listen to them and understand where they're at with their business, and then explain to them how our workshop works usually, which is a form of understanding and getting clear on the things that they're maybe relaying. So we'll ask certain questions that guide towards being clear about what those intentions are, rather than just how they feel in the moment. So we almost slow down the process to make sure that they are clear and we've all got in writing what their intentions are before we then start exploring the options of how they might do that. And then once we've explored the option and chosen an option, we're then taking them through effectively a program to say, okay, let us hold you accountable and advise you on how we facilitate the execution of this plan that we've put together.
So if I'm that business owner, Paul, and I want to look at this and I say, okay, I want to understand maybe what my business could be, and that could be capital, could be lifestyle, and I want to engage with MAP to do this. How does this work? Is this a one-on-one thing? Is this a client signs up to that workshop? Or is it a cohort type thing that we see in other areas where I can potentially be with another 4 or 5 people that have got a similar goal to me?
Definitely one-to-one, because it's very sensitive and it's very private, and it requires a lot of deep conversations and work with that person, as I say, confidential information. However, we are now exploring adding a program style approach to it, because we work with 220 businesses, most of which are digital creative. there will be inevitably other people that are going through a similar journey, having similar questions. There'll be others that are further ahead, others that are further behind. So we're looking at creating basically more of a platform. We already have a community, a WhatsApp community, where those people are talking, but creating more of an intentional program where we can bring those people together in a room so they can learn from each other's experiences. But that's not in replacement of one-to-one time, that's in addition to it.
Okay, so what you're saying is there's a ready-made solution today, which is you can engage Map to look at you and your business, which either side of that line you want to be on, but also hopefully in the near future we'll be able to do it on a cohort style basis. So if somebody's interested in either doing something today or maybe joining that waiting list that says, let me know when I can be in a room with some like-minded agency owners, how do they get in touch? How do they register interest?
Just reach out, just send me an email, paul@wearemap.co.uk, or message me on LinkedIn, and we'll start a discussion. It's great if people have listened to this and it's resonated with them, but we won't try to progress something that, between us and the business owner, we don't think they're ready for. So if they're in a position at the moment whereby they'd love to work on these things, but they've got other fires to put out, personally or business-wise, then at least we've started the conversation and we can come back to it when it suits them. And if they're ready to go, we can talk through how that works in terms of the scope, what's included, and the prices as well.
Excellent. Okay, well, I think that's probably the ideal time to stop. So obviously, as you just said, I hope it has been useful to people. I hope it does make sense. If you do want to talk to any of us further, please do so. And we will see you again in the Map Room soon. Thanks and bye for now.